YouTube decided I'm no longer allowed to use the music in my intro, so now, until I find another one, you're stuck with my voice.
What is up guys, this is Linthio, coming at you with a discussion video about creativity in the Yu-Gi-Oh community and just in decks in general, how I think archetypes are to blame for the death of creativity. Now, a little bit of history going back into the earlier formats. We had a lot of decks that were just cookie cutter, which basically was all the best cards thrown into one. There was no archetypes, there were archetypes, but there was no solid archetypes. You know how you have like Fire Fist as an archetype, you've got Sylvance as an archetype, Mermail, so on and so forth. You know, there's very constrained decks that have certain cards that work with only those decks, well, effectively with only those decks. And how the game back then was just kind of so open. While you had, you know, your typical cards, your staples that are in there, a lot of decks were just kind of completely random and such. But as the game progressed, there were a lot more and more kind of archetypes that were brought up. I think that it slightly killed the creative flair that it once used to have. We just have archetypes, really. Like, if you look at the game, it is just archetypes running around. That's all it is. You don't really see any random decks coming out, because they just can't stand up to it. You have to have synergy in your deck now. Arguably that it's just the way that the game has evolved, and with evolution you have to evolve with the actual game, unless you want to get left behind. It's quite interesting to see that how these decks that back then had all these cookie cutter cards in, that you would now call staples, just kind of, you know, you just throw it all in, it'd be fine. But that was very primitive days of the game. Some people would argue that that's what it is. It was a very primitive deck in the game, and now that we have so many cards open to ourselves, that we can, you know, we can build these big archetypes and we can build these big decks. The other side of that is, since we have that massive card pool, why can't we build some non-archetype decks that are just as successful? And I think it's down to the way Konami have built the cards. They've engineered the cards into the game. They have archetype cards that only work with archetypes, and you can't really conform into something else. And it's quite interesting the way that they've actually done it. But it's something that I always thought that it's kind of killed the creativity in the way that you build your deck and the way that you go around actually looking at how to build a deck, because everyone wants to move on to something new occasionally and eventually. And I always do it. I always look at different decks and different cards, and I'll look at a card and think if it's cool enough, or if it's something that I've liked for a long time and never really touched, I'd be like, okay, I want to look at this card and build a deck around it, or I want to revisit a card and build a deck around it once more. And that's what I always do, and that's what I really enjoy, and that's why I think it's really creative, and I enjoy that massive aspect. But for some people, they just stick with an archetype, and they prefer just having these archetypes because in a way that it's already built for you, because there's a limited amount of cards that you can actually use in that deck effectively without having dead draws and dead cards. So it's an interesting thing. I want to know what you guys think. Do you think creativity is dead now that archetypes are so massive in the game, or do you think that it's just the way of life, the way of evolution in the game, that tough, you know, deal with it, things change? Back then it was cookie cutters, that was the thing, now it's archetypes, that's the thing. Cheers guys, thank you very much for watching. Let me know in the comment section down below, and yeah, peace.